my fellow wizards, it's a brand new year and time once again to talk about all the changes Wizard101 has had, but more importantly, all the changes they still need to make. I made a similar video last year, and let's just say there are lots of things Wizard101 could still improve on. A lot of the issues I brought up last year still exist and need to be addressed, but this year I'd like to cover some new topics, so I'll leave a link in the description for people who want to watch both videos. I do want to give credit where credit is due and say that 3 of my 10 changes from last year actually did happen, including KingsIsle adding new ways to get spellements in the form of new skeleton key bosses, new loot pity crafting systems for various gear, and the ability for players to change their name and gender for existing characters. It's been great to see the changes people have asked for finally become reality, so hopefully we can influence even more positive changes this year. However, in the meantime, let's dive into the 10 things Wizard101 needs to change in 2024. Number 10. Better spell card descriptions. Wizard101's spell card symbols have always been a little bit confusing, but in recent years with the addition of gambits and Rochambeau systems used in both PvP and higher level PvE worlds and fights, they've become darn near impossible to understand for a lot of players. Some are pretty easy to figure out, but pretty quickly it starts to feel like we're translating hieroglyphics and need a freaking Rosetta Stone to get anywhere. Like, what is even happening on some of these cards? I will say that under the Help tab, there is a basic symbol guide that players can refer to, but the issue is that KI isn't consistent with how they label certain types of spells, which makes the confusion that much worse. Honestly, the whole card symbol system just needs an overhaul so everything is consistent and following the same rules, or even better, add a new UI where you can hover over card descriptions so they'll tell you in clear language exactly what the spell does. This would be helpful from both a quality of life and accessibility standpoint because I'm sure a lot of people struggle to even tell the subtle difference between different symbols to begin with. Sometimes it feels like you need a magnifying glass as is. I also think gambits need to be better explained in-game to players, maybe through a short Diego quest tutorial where he walks you through how gambits work and shows a few examples of how to activate them, because right now they feel very inaccessible to PvE players especially, and people may feel like they hit a wall when they're then forced to consider gambits in higher level worlds, or when farming for gear from the final boss in Novus, for example, where the fight heavily depends on your understanding of both gambits and archmastery. Number 9. Updated AoE animations. This is just a very much needed quality of life issue related to how AoEs play out on screen. Back in the spring 2021 update, KI changed most of the AoE hit animations so that instead of hitting one enemy at a time like they used to, which took up a lot of time when there were 4 enemies on screen, the attacks would instead hit all enemies at once, vastly speeding up the casting time. This was a fantastic change, however, not all the AoE spells in the game got this upgrade, and the rest desperately need some attention. There are a number that never received the change, but a few off the top of my head include Power Nova, Sun Serpent, Raging Bull, Snow Angel, Snowball Barrage, Basilisk, the School Wyverns, and Spinosaur, though there are plenty of others I'm not mentioning. Some of these aren't too bad, like Power Nova still feels decently fast, but some of these are downright criminal to use in an extended fight because they just take so freaking long to play out. Let's watch this play out, shall we? I am begging you, KI, please put us out of our misery and update these spell animations. Number 8. Fix archmastery affecting teammates. Okay, this is a more complicated issue with the way archmastery works in Wizard101. I've made more in-depth videos on this topic for people who want to understand how the system works, which I'll link in the description, but essentially your archmastery stat affects how quickly you get school pips each round. Getting school pips are important because you can use them for a lot of specialty spells at higher levels, but also other spells like Deer Knight, Ship of Fools, or Rat Spin, which are prized by both life and death wizards especially because they lack any early game AoEs. However, I would just like to remind everyone that we almost got Leaf Storm as a trainable spell, but you all had to ruin it. We had the world handed to us on a silver platter, folks, but you just had to watch it all burn. I blame the PvPers. Anyway, the simple version is archmastery gives school pips, and people like having school pips to make their spells work. However, the issue is that your teammates' archmastery stats can negatively affect your ability to get school pips if their stat is higher than yours. Yes, you heard me right. Your friends literally hurt your ability to cast spells in a fight, and at the extreme end can actually completely handicap you. In a previous video, I did some testing, and if a higher level is in your lower level fight, it can get bad enough that you can't gain any school pips at all, which is just kind of irritating for no reason. However, it also affects players even if they're just a few levels apart. So if you're questing with a friend or strangers and you're even one level apart, they may get their school pip round 1 and you have to wait an extra round or 2 to get yours, which can mean the difference between you both being able to finish a fight quickly or not. So yes, while overall this is a more minor annoyance, it's just ridiculous to me that your stats should negatively affect the people around you who are trying to work together. And it can create unnecessary bad blood and tension when your archmastery stat makes it so another player can't cast their spells. Since you can now socket archmastery jewels to boost your chance further, people can get downright nasty when they see you have more archmastery than them, as this poor player experienced in a recent Reddit post. The current system just doesn't seem like a good way to foster positive interactions and friendship in the community, and frankly, it needs to go ASAP. Number 7, pack pity. I think most players at one time or another are guilty of blowing a bunch of crowns on packs only to never get the thing they wanted. It's very easy to fall into the sunk cost fallacy and keep spending because of the hope that if you buy just one more pack, you'll finally get the thing you want to drop. And since you've already spent so much, you can't give up now, right? It's especially frustrating when certain mounts like the Gulchers or Brontos also give stat bonuses that can mean the difference between winning and losing your next PvP match or raid. Which is why I think it's high time KA implemented a pack pity system so you're guaranteed to get the item you want after spending a certain amount of crowns. Gacha games like Genshin Impact have become incredibly popular and lucrative, and they all give players pity on their loot rolls after a certain point, so I don't see why KI couldn't successfully implement a similar system. There are a number of different ways to do this, but one easy option is that after you buy a certain number of packs, you can pick one item from all the contents available in the packs to get as a free bonus, and then the counter resets again. Another option might be that if you get enough temporary mounts, you can trade those 1 or 7 day mounts in for a permanent version of the mount. Cause I don't know about you all, but once I've gone down the spending rabbit hole on packs, every single temporary mount feels like a huge slap in the face and I end up trashing them out of frustration. However, with the pack pity system, players would actually be happy to get temporary mounts because they can eventually trade them in for a permanent version. Basically, KI needs to add some kind of pity system so players feel like they're actually working towards something rather than just getting ripped off repeatedly. And I genuinely think it would positively impact KI's profits as well, so it's really a win-win. Number 6, re-roll pet talents. Any pet breeders out there know the pain of finally getting your pet up to Mega only to see it fail miserably with something like extra mana. You weren't even supposed to be in the talent pool! Then you have to start all over again with a new baby and waste all your Mega Snacks on that one just for it to inevitably fail again at the worst possible moment. So wouldn't it be nice to have the ability to re-roll all or some of the pet talents your pet inherits? I think it would be a fantastic change to allow players to spend crowns or gold to entirely re-roll a pet's talents or even select a specific talent to change. So, for instance, if your pet fails at Mega, you could pay a few crowns to re-roll just your last talent and maybe get the one you actually wanted, assuming it was somewhere in the talent pool. I have a feeling KI wouldn't allow us to directly pick the new talent we want, so some degree of randomness would probably have to remain, but this would still be a much better option than starting fresh with a brand new baby pet. For advanced pet breeders, it might be helpful to be able to re-roll an entire talent pool at baby, especially if they know right off the bat that the pet has inherited something they don't want in the pool. If Kea offered this as an option for the cost of a reasonable amount of crowns, I know players would jump at the chance to finish their ideal pets more quickly, so Kea would also benefit from this change from a monetary perspective. They can even add a re-roll pet talents elixir to the crown shop or make them craftable like others that Puro has available. I just think this type of update is a no-brainer. Number 5, mount and pet stitching. Along similar lines, Wizard101 also needs to add mount and pet stitching to the game. Now, I actually brought up this as a potential change in last year's video, but I'm going to bring it up again because there's actually been some updates about this topic. Basically, the idea is that there are a lot of mounts and pets that players really like using for cosmetic reasons, but we end up being stuck using the best meta choices instead, which basically leaves us using mounts that give stats like pierce, damage, or pip chance, or with options that give us set bonuses like the Frillasaur and Bronto mounts, which are just not the best looking choices out there. However, if we could somehow stitch mounts and pets or otherwise trade the stats and set bonuses to other options, people could finally have the best looking choices to go with their gear without having to sacrifice their builds. Like, I'd personally love to add a speed boost or extra damage to my Wolf of Winter mount if possible. Last year, a lot of players called for this exact change, and it may have actually gotten some traction with the developers. Back in June 2023, the Atmoplex community suggested the idea of making mount jewel slots that would basically allow players to swap different stat boosting jewels between mounts. So like if you had the Gulcher mounts with a 3% damage boost, you could transfer that damage boost to a different mount by unsocketing and resocketing the jewel. Ratbeard later endorsed this idea on one of his streams, which at least means the developers are seriously considering it. I think it would be great if pets could get the same treatment, but with item card jewel slots instead. So just like adding mount jewels with different stats, it would be great to be able to change which item cards pets give and assign them to different pets so you aren't stuck with a certain type of pet just because of the useful item card it gives. Basically, it sucks when players feel trapped into using only a handful of pets and mounts because of the stat bonuses they give, so these changes would allow a whole lot more variety while still allowing you to keep your desired build intact. Hopefully the developers actually go forward with this change soon. Number 4, more character customization. This is another issue I also brought up last year, but there are some potential updates on this topic that I'd love to discuss. I think we'd all like more customization for our wizards, whether that be new hairstyles, cosmetic gear, or things like tattoos, earrings, or other facial changes. Like, don't get me wrong, there are a few hairstyles that I honestly adore, but then some of the others are just, not the best. For comparison, Pyro101 has a ton of cosmetic options like masks and face paint that just add a lot more fun options to play around with, and I'd love to see similar cosmetics brought to Wiz. Cause like, the best we have now are the school face tattoos, and to me, these just kind of feel meh by comparison. People out here looking like weird Barbie, not gonna lie. There are just so many cool additions that KI could add to the Magic Mirror, or even as premium cosmetics in the Crown Shop, and I think we're long overdue for some new ones. In addition, let's talk about the biggest cosmetic change the players have been begging for years, a color wheel for dyeing gear. Right now we're stuck with very limited color choices, some of which are gendered, which just feels silly in 2024. Like, why can't my wizard boys out here wear pink? But what's crazy is that we've actually seen leaks that a custom color dyeing system was being worked on last year. Back in April of last year, evidence came out that showed that KI was actively working on an RGB dyeing system where you can change different values to create custom colors to apply to various gear pieces. However, for whatever reason, we have yet to see any progress made, and there's been no news of a potential release date anytime soon for this feature. We can only hope that it's something they're still working on behind the scenes and that we'll get more info later this year. Like, please, KI, let us finally have the ability to make people's eyes bleed with the ugliest color combos. It's what the player base needs. Number 3, bring back good sales. Okay, this complaint is a bit more vague, but has anyone else noticed that a lot of the so-called sales in the Crown Shop and online just kind of suck now? Like, more than usual? There's a bunch of examples I can point to, but let me highlight a couple so you get what I'm talking about. First, a lot of mounts or other gear and furniture aren't sold as single items for a set price, but they're placed instead in these weird bundles with tons of other random stuff, and they also always include mega snack packs, which just unnecessarily drives up the price. Like, if I want just this one mount, I'd have to pay a huge price and get a bunch of stuff I don't actually want when KI could literally just sell the mount on its own. It's just very frustrating. Then there's sales that just don't happen anymore. Like, do any of you remember bundle paloozas? They used to have all the bundles on sale for 25 or even 50% off a couple times a year, and now they just stopped entirely. Like, they used to, at minimum, have a 50% bundle sale right around Christmas every year without fail. And this year, while they did offer some of the bundles in the online shop, there was no sale, so you were stuck with using your crappy 10% off coupon code, which can only be used for one transaction. I used to save up money every year just to buy bundles at half price, so it's really disappointing that they've just stopped doing that sale entirely now. I'd love to see them bring back proper bundle paloozas, especially because I know a lot of people just straight up won't buy anything now. So I feel like this choice also isn't good for KI from a PR and monetary perspective. Like, I want my freaking bundles, KI. Finally, there's the issue of having all these temporary mounts in the Scroll of Fortune that then pop up later as permanent versions that you can get only by spending an eye-watering amount of crowns in crowns reward events. Scroll of Fortune would be so much better if they just put a permanent mount in the actual scroll instead of giving us these silly 30-day temporary ones and then dangling the better permanent ones right in our face but gatekeeping them behind a huge crown paywall. It just feels like a straight up money grab, but if you want to know more about this specific issue, I recommend checking out my other video on the topic because there's honestly just too many issues to cover here. It just feels like more than ever, Wizard101 is filled with money grabbing promotions that really only serve to exploit their player base, and it needs to stop. Number 2, gold skeleton key team-ups. Oh boy, this one is just super irritating and I don't know why it hasn't been fixed yet. Basically, when KI added new gold skeleton key bosses in the summer 2022 update, that kind of broke players' ability to use team up for those key bosses. During the update, KI introduced a number of new key bosses that would drop lore spellements and pack gear and redesigned some old key bosses as well, so some old bosses that used to require wooden or stone skeleton keys would now require gold skeleton keys and have new cheats. These new key bosses would also have different tier difficulties depending on the level of the wizards entering them and thus different level drops. This was a way to give players new options for getting spellements and even access to some old pack drops, which is definitely a great change. However, issues quickly arose when these dungeons automatically scaled to the lowest level wizard in a group, and if any higher level wizards were also in the group, they would no longer be allowed to get drops. Yep, basically KI designed these dungeons to punish higher level players helping lower levels farm by making sure that if they helped a lower level in a different tier, they would get no drops themselves, instead getting participation trophies, which are useless reagents that basically just feel like a slap in the face, especially given the rarity of gold skeleton keys. This, in turn, affected team up because you can't see others' levels when teaming up for a dungeon, so inevitably people of a bunch of different levels would get grouped together and people would get very upset when they wouldn't get drops because a lower level was in the group. This design choice just generally created a whole bunch of bad blood between players, but instead of fixing the issue, KI just disabled most of the gold skeleton key boss team-ups and have still yet to fix them over a year and a half later. I feel like a fairly simple fix would be having different team-ups for different tiers, which would show up as separate options in the team-up kiosk. Or, just stop punishing higher level players for helping lower level players. Like, I feel like they tried to fix a non-existent issue of higher levels helping lower levels by just nuking the entire system and then never fixing the mess they made. At least for now, your best bet is to find a team through Discord or other communities that are the same level as you to tackle these key bosses, but it would be so much easier to find groups if KI would just fix their system in the first place. I don't know guys, this one just feels kind of lazy on the developer's part. Number 1, remove badge locked drops. Alright, here we go people. In recent updates, KI has made certain drops badge locked, which means once you quest past a certain point, you can no longer get certain items as drops. This included the level 50 Malastare gear, for example, which only drops until you get the final badge in Celestia, but it also applies to gear like the newer level 100 Chrysalis gear, which you can no longer farm for after completing Polaris. This change even affects spellements dropping from various worlds. So, for instance, if you get to Novus, but you still want to go back and farm for spellements in Caramel, they'll no longer drop for you, with the same applying to lower tier spellements too. Just like the level 50 Malastare gear, once you finish Celestia, bosses in Dragonspire and earlier worlds won't drop rank 1 through 6 spellements anymore, which leave players unable to max out their spells. I think this change was originally to prevent higher level wizards from farming for their lower level alt characters, but again, KI has made really negative changes to prevent something that I think wasn't even really an issue in the first place. Many players need to max out their spellements in order to have an extra edge in PvP or difficult content like raids or challenge dungeons, but are blocked off from typical farming methods because of their badge status. While some alternative options to get spellements exist, farming is by far the quickest and easiest option, and there's currently no alternative to get the old gear pieces at all. So if I want a piece of Malastare gear as a stitch piece for my max level wizard, I'm basically out of luck unless I create a lower level wizard to farm it for me, which just feels ridiculous. I'm not sure why KI is so against higher level players helping lower levels or farming for lower level gear, but in trying to prevent it, they just created so many more issues and caused their player base to have more negative experiences as a whole. So what if your Max Storm farms some Chrysalis gear for your lower level fire? A lot of times the gear drops are rare no matter what, so players shouldn't be punished just for trying to speed up the often very boring process a little bit. To me, this is a no-brainer. Remove badge-locked gear, let people farm for whatever they want, whenever they want, and stop making it so difficult to get spellements. There, done. I fixed Wizard101, guys. Okay, In all seriousness, I know these issues are a lot more complicated than that, but I hope at least some of these suggestions are implemented this year. The positive changes we saw in 2023 are in a large part due to community feedback, so if any of these changes appeal to you, definitely let the developers know on social media like Twitter or in the official Wizard101 Discord run by the devs themselves, which I'll link below. The developers do actually listen to the player base occasionally, so make your voice count. I just hope 2024 brings a ton of great new content to the game we all know and love. Alright, my fellow wizards, those were my top 10 changes Wizard101 needs to make in 2024. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and as always, I hope to see you out there in the spiral, and I wish you all a happy new year.